Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what time zone you're joining us from. My only previous interaction with artificial intelligence was through the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator films. But in the last 18 months, AI has been front and center in technology news. My name's Daniel Tatarski, and I'm delighted and excited to host this event as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. In this, the second of 3 LinkedIn Live discussions, we'll look at the growth of AI and how cybersecurity and the legislation around it is trying to keep up. Holding my hand as I pull back the curtain to take a peek at the wizard are 3 SGS experts in the field. First up is Tomislav Nad, Lead Innovation Technologist, CEO Office. Next, we have Willie Fabricius, Global Head of Strategy and Business Development Information Security, SGS. And completing today's team is Martin Schaffer, Global Head of Emerging Technologies, CEO Office. Hello to all of you.
Hello.
Hey, Daniel.
Thanks for having us.
We got there. Okay, so before we get going, can each of you tell me a little bit about your role at SGS? Let's kick off with you, Tomislav.
All right, so I'm lead innovation technologist working in a team which investigates the impact of emerging technologies on our business and on the businesses of our customers. And my role in this team is to provide technological expertise in various areas, especially obviously in those emerging technologies we are investigating. And my current focus is the technologies behind cybersecurity and artificial intelligence.
Okay, that's great. And it also looks like you get the best chair.
Thanks.
It's a nice chair. Okay, and what about you, Willie?
Well, as the global head for strategy in knowledge, obviously I'm responsible for identifying new trends, new things that can be translated in products and solutions beneficial for our clients. And that includes, among others, sitting on various ISO committees, helping to shape ISO standards that are coming online in the future.
Okay. And finally, Martin.
Yeah, hello. I am the global head of emerging technologies. So Tomislav is obviously in my team. So our team is looking at the potential and the value of emerging technologies, which is around artificial intelligence, but also other technologies like extended reality, metaverse, and things like that. And we look at to what extent those technologies can, on the one hand, be used by our company to improve operations, but also to unlock new business. And on the other side, because we are a TIC company, a testing, inspection, certification company, if our clients develop emerging technologies or are using them, we are there to assess potentially the trustworthiness of those solutions. That's typically driven by regulations, and that's also one of the topics of today.
Right, well, that's good. Well, we'll get to that a little bit later. But staying with you, Martin, I want to start by asking what on the surface might be a very simple question. What is artificial intelligence?
So there are obviously a lot of definitions if you look it up, but in a nutshell, it's really about the science to replicate human intelligence, which includes obviously various things. So if you look at all these cognitive things, we can do touch, sense, smell, see, but also going a little bit beyond about language processing. It's about learning. It's about creativity and reasoning and problem solving, up to really emotional intelligence, social intelligence. And usually in artificial intelligence, we distinguish there are different levels, I would say, of intelligence. And that's, I think, important also to explain. There's the artificial narrow intelligence. That's all about these solutions that specifically solve one task very good.
Right. So maybe like a chess computer.
Yes, exactly. So it's for one specific thing extremely good and goes far beyond what a human being can do. And this is 95% of all the solutions out there. But then there's the next level, which would be artificial general intelligence, where a machine is really going to a level of having intellectual properties or capabilities like a human being, in combination several tasks, but also this critical thinking, planning, deciding, and things like that. And then there's another level even where you see artificial superintelligence, where we see a computer going beyond a human being, and even capable of improving its own intelligence. But that's this latter two have not been achieved yet. So all what we hear up to now is primarily narrow intelligence.
Right. Okay. Well, as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, I think the best way to start is to ask the question, what impact does artificial intelligence have on cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I used to look there from different angles. So on the one hand, we distinguish between the attacker side and then the side of the one who defends against the cyber attack. And here we can in each of those distinguish between AI for cyber and cyber for AI. So AI for cyber would be really an attacker or a defender using AI to either attack a system or defend a system. And then cyber for AI is really when I have an AI solution, and on the one hand, I may attack that AI solution, or I defend that AI solution against cyber attacks. That's more or less how we would see the different elements. And obviously, you can then also combine. You can say an attacker tries to use AI to attack an AI system, and so on and so forth. But there is really a lot of different possibilities on combinations, which is very interesting, obviously.
Yeah, and now that we're integrating AI into products and services, does that cause any new cybersecurity threats?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all the traditional attacks are applicable because AI is just a computer system, yet another computer system, a little bit different, but in principle, all these typical attacks where you have a remote attack, for example, or a local attack when you have access to a device, and so on, is possible. But when you are going then into the specifics of AI, an attacker typically tries whatever system it is to find special characteristics or attack surface on the things you design. And if it's an AI system, you have a model and you train the model. So a key role plays the data with which you train the model. So a little bit like if you put crap in, crap comes out. So if you manipulate data going into the model, you might get some effects later on that the model is not behaving as specified. To give you an example, if you have a car and the car for autonomous driving, and the car is driving and it's trained to stop when it sees a stop sign, but somewhere in the training data there are some examples trained in where you see a stop sign with a Mickey Mouse sticker, for example. That was one of the examples you can find in the internet. And then when the car saw that one, it didn't stop, but it accelerated more or less. And that's in that context. Or, for example, another thing is when a model is in the field or an AI system running, that you try to extract in an interaction information about the data based on which it has been trained, which could cause, for example, a privacy issue. So there are very specific nuances of attacks that come in addition to the traditional attacks.
Right. Okay. There's a lot to think about. So what needs to be done to deal with these threats?
Yeah, I mean, next to considering designing a system securely, like you do in every form, you need to incorporate obviously those specific new types of attacks. But in the end, it's about always about security by design. So really thinking about security right from the beginning. So it's not about I design my AI system and later on I throw it to the cyber team and they put some security around. It's really right from the beginning.
Yeah.
You need to think about it. And it's not just cybersecurity by design, but also if you more look generally, you could say trustworthiness by design. And that's obviously also the key topic of today.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, I think actually what I'd like to do now is talk to Tomislav about trustworthiness. What do we mean when we're talking about trustworthiness of artificial intelligence?
I mean, in general, it sounds very abstract when we're talking about trust in an AI system or trust in a specific technology in general, right? But in the case of artificial intelligence systems, we have a very good and common understanding what it actually means. And basically, it means that you define certain key requirements your AI system should fulfill in order to be considered to be trusted. And those key requirements can be various things, where cybersecurity, as Martin was mentioning, is an important part of it.
Right. And what are the key requirements?
So besides security, as Martin was mentioning, we have a robustness and accuracy, for example. So making sure that the system behaves also in unknown environments as expected. Safety, security requirement, making sure that the AI system does not harm any human beings. Privacy should be protected by the AI system. Should not leak any privacy information, maybe part of the training data it was used to train with. Transparency is another thing you need to take care of. So meaning that you should make sure that it's clear how you develop the AI system, but also that the AI system itself is explainable. So this something called explainability, where the goal is basically for each output of the system, you clearly understand how this output has been generated and what kind of inputs were relevant for the AI system to come to these decisions. And there are a couple of other additional things, but in general, there's also a list of key requirements where every AI system developer and operator or user of an AI system should be aware that those are quite important, and you should do what's possible in this context and this to fulfill those kind of requirements to consider your system trustworthy.
Right. Okay. Just before we go on, I just want to welcome any people who've just joined us. I'm talking to 3 SGS experts about AI and cybersecurity. I'm talking to Tomislav Nad, Willy Fabricius, and Martin Schaffer as part of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The security of my teeth is not that great at the moment. We're looking at the growth of AI and how cybersecurity and the legislation around it is trying to keep up. Now, if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section and we'll try to answer them at the end if we have time. Let me go back to Tomislav now. We were talking about the trustworthiness of an AI system. Do we know how to assess the trustworthiness?
So that depends on which key requirement you're actually looking at. So generally speaking, there are different ways to assess the technology. So we can have audits of the management system surrounding a technology, audit of the development of the technology, or even go to independent testing, where basically independent third party like SGS takes a product or a system and independently tests and verifies and validates that those key requirements are fulfilled. So, but depending on which area we are looking into that, there is a different sort of maturity level when we're looking at this assessment. For accuracy robustness, this is quite several methodologies are established. We have a good understanding how to assess it, and we know how to do that basically. But areas like explainability are still in the beginning of research phase, where certain things still need to be figured out, and some couple of key questions need to be answered by the research community first before we can pick that up. But there's a lot of areas where we clearly know how to assess, independently test, and obviously we can also audit quite various types of key requirements of an AI system. Specifically, one of the new ISO standards is around AI management systems, where it's about the governance around building and using AI systems in general.
Right. And will the usage and development of AI be regulated?
So in general, yes. So that's a clear yes, basically, because in Europe, there's the European Union AI Act in development, which will regulate the development and the usage of AI system in the European Union. So in EU, there will be a regulation for AI. Across the globe, there are other activities going around that, a lot of discussions thinking about what needs to be done with the AI system. But since the rise of ChatGPT and basically the hype around generative AI, the wish or the need for AI or for regulation around AI has risen, and a lot of people are now in favor of regulating AI, which weren't before.
Right. And you mentioned that the EU AI Act is in development at the moment. Where are they up to?
So we have the current draft version is quite advanced already. It was in May approved by the European Parliament, and now it's in a trilogue stage between the European Parliament, the Council of European Union, and the European Commission. Basically, they are discussing and try to finalize the regulation, where the goal is to finalize it by end of this year. Then it should be basically be published beginning of next year, and then will be probably a grace period of 2 years until it will becoming effective. And basically, everybody who would like to operate in the AI system in the European Union will need to adhere to.
Right. And would it be quicker to use AI to write the regulation? That's a joke.
Who
I'm sorry.
knows? Probably the new version. As far as I remember, they didn't state anything about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if stuff like ChatGPT were supportive in the
Yeah.
writing some of the text.
And what will it actually regulate?
So that's a very good question. So the EU AI Act will not regulate every AI system. It will focus on high risk system. There's a definition what high risk means. It will basically touch existing regulations, so like medical devices, or machinery directive, or automotive space. So everywhere where there's a high risk that some fundamental rights of the European Union or humans can be in danger by using the AI system. So this will be regulated, and the majority of AI systems are not in this category, but there is still a large portion will be affected by that. And then there's something like called foundation models in the EU Act. That's the latest edition, where they're trying to regulate stuff like the generative AI, where you have basically models which are in general in nature, and just when you put it in context in a specific application, you know what actually it can do, and you know the risk involved around that. So there are some basic requirements around foundation models and a lot of requirements around high-risk systems.
Right. And are there any other regulations we need to be aware of?
So there are a lot of discussions around the globe about that. So a regulation as far progressed as the European Union AI Act, there's nothing comparable to that. There are a couple of regulations very specific to types of AI system and the requirements in China. But there is the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act in Canada. There's the Blueprint of AI Bill of Rights in the US. And there are other areas around the globe where there's mostly recommendations, guidelines, but also a lot of discussions in what needs to be done and if they should establish regulation.
Right. Okay. Moving on to you now, Willie. What is the process to get certified to ISO IEC 42001 or 42001, as some people call it?
Thanks, Daniel. That's a very good question, but I think it's also important to first explain what is 42001.
Yeah, that would be great.
So ISO 42001 is a management system standard, and it's not really nothing new in terms of concept, because the concept of management systems is pretty old. We know about ISO 9001 for quality management. We do know ISO 27001 for information security management. And obviously now we have the ISO 42001 out there. Or should I say, to be very precise, right now it's in the FDIS, Final Draft International Standard. And we expect that the final version of the standard is being published quite soon. So for the benefits of the audience, between the FDIS and the final version, there are only minor changes allowed, changes related to typographical errors, grammar errors, and things like that. So for all intents and purposes, we do know what the exact structure and requirements of ISO 42001 will be. So as I said, as a management system, it's all about creating the necessary governance structure for an organization to design, deploy, and potentially modify an AI system. In terms of cost, well, I see we have people from Brazil, from Kenya, from Egypt, Saudi, from Europe on the call. It really depends on the day rates, but more importantly, the complexity of the management system we are going to audit. So it's quite easy to recognize that a company of, let's say, 10 people out of one office, no own infrastructure, and everything is on the cloud, is less complex than an organization with 150,000 employees active in 180 countries using multiple cloud environments to design and develop their AI solution. So the cost really depends upon the complexity. But I've been asked that question for the last, 30 years. And I really would need to emphasize the cost of certification is neglectable compared to the costs the company incurs internally of implementing the management system.
Yeah.
So it's on a regular base, it takes 3, 6, 9, maybe even a year, 6, 9 months, or even a year to implement a system. Now do the simple math. You have a full-time employee working on that. You know what an FTE costs, and therefore you know what the cost of the system might be. On the other hand, we as a certification body come in only in for a couple of days, and that's neglectable compared to that cost.
Yeah.
So when I hear the question, how much does certification cost? Nothing. But this is not really the answer people look for. You really look for some kind of number, and that really depends upon the complexity.
Right. And sorry, can you just actually take us through talking about the complexity? And I know it'd be different for every different type of company. What's the actual process to get the certification?
Yes, that is a very good question indeed. It starts with a very simple thing, and this is buying the standard. And you may laugh about that, but from own personal experience as an auditor for other management systems, I can tell you, yes, there are companies out there that think that they can implement a system without knowing the requirements. I don't know what they were thinking, but it didn't work out, to be very blunt here. So that's the very first step, buying the standard, and then, frankly speaking, getting your people educated and trained. Go to a reputable training company like SGS and attend those training classes we are offering, and you will learn what the standard means. I mean, can everyone read? Yes, but there's always the difference between reading and hearing it from another person explained.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult just reading it and then implementing. So it's really important that people get trained by experienced trainers and subject matter experts. Second step would obviously be then to implement the system, and that should be done step by step with identifying the context in which the company operates, the risk assessment, statement of applicability, impact analysis, and then most importantly, the internal audit process. And if you have already a certified management system to another ISO standard, then you can use that very, very same internal audit system to drive the improvement for the AI management system. After you have done that to, I don't know, 80% or so completion, please invite us for pre-assessment. In that pre-assessment, we will identify the gaps you will have, but that pre-assessment will not have any impact whatsoever on the later certification activity, which only starts with what we call stage 1, which is making sure that the fundamental principal requirements are implemented, and then moving on to stage 2, where the actual audit goes into depth and analyzing and recognizing and testing whether the requirements are all implemented. Let's assume there are a couple of issues. We would call them non-conformances, which is absolutely normal, so don't worry about that. Those non-conformances would need to be addressed by suitable corrective actions. Once that is done, the certificate is being issued and is valid for 3 years. And in order to maintain the validity of the certificate over those 3 years, there are 2 surveillance audits necessary in an annual interval. And after 3 years, a recertification audit will take place that is very, very similar in content and length as the original stage 2.
Yeah.
Coming back to the non-conformances, I truly believe that non-conformances are a badge of honor, not a sign of failure.
Yeah.
Because a badge of honor means you have now the privilege, and I really mean that, to make the system better and more competitive.
Yeah.
That's what it is really all about.
Okay. So are there any current regulations actually requiring ISO 42001 certification, or is it currently voluntary?
It's currently voluntary, but I can tell you, I'm sitting right now at the SC42 committee meeting in Vienna, Austria. And yes, there are representatives from several governmental entities, among others from the EU, that are expressing their keen interest to drive further development of ISO standards so that those ISO standards can be incorporated in legislation.
Right.
So as of today, October 17th, the answer is no. But that said, don't be surprised if you see in future drafts and future regulations, whether this is in the EU or whether this is on a global base, references to ISO standards. It will happen.
Okay.
I would like to add here something, because
Yeah,
we were
please.
just talking about the European Union AI Act, right? And there is a list of requirements around the quality management systems for AI system development users. So basically, there's one requirement saying you should have a quality management system for AI, and there's a bunch of requirements what that actually means, right? And looking at ISO 42001, it is a quality management system for AI system, right? And if you are compliant to the ISO standard, you're probably compliant to this regulation as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So translation to plain words, certification is not requirement. However, if you have a 42001 management system certified, you fulfill that requirement.
Martin, I think you wanted to add something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what is the wrong impression very often is that regulations like the EU Artificial Intelligence Act are on a level of detail that you can just take it and you exactly know what to implement, and then also us, for example, from the testing, inspection, certification industry, exactly know how to assess. That's not the case. Typically, this is a high-level view and in which direction it needs to go. But when it's broken down to the reality, there is a huge governance framework typically around that one, where you have more clear breakdown of the requirements to fulfill them. One way is to reflect it in standards, and there's also an urgency request to Sense and Elect to create the standards for Europe. And then so that the people know what to implement, but then once they have implemented it, we also, as in our job, in our work, usually especially in the test labs, need clarity how to assess that, because there are different ways to assess a system, and there needs to be also a harmonization and consistency among test labs. So imagine a company goes to us, run through a test, and then goes with the same thing to TÜV Süd or to Bureau Veritas. In reality, there should be the same result. It's a little bit tricky when you look at AI and especially cybersecurity, because it's not just a black-white push-button test. It's when you look at cybersecurity at high risk, it's about ethical hacking. It's really a very creative, to some extent also subjective work for qualified people. But they are all following typically a common state-of-the-art understanding that is regularly aligned with the authorities and certain expert groups that also align what is a state-of-the-art attack, what are the typical attacks that needs to be tried out also in a lab. And it's usually a vulnerability assessment going on. So when you assess a system, you really tailor to the system, you make a specific test plan then. Yeah, so you really analyze where could be vulnerabilities, you break down a specific tailored test plan, and then you attack a system. So it's really hard to harmonize that, but that's also a key element of the whole framework, including all the rules, who is allowed to do what, who is approved for what, and also get the qualification to do such an assessment. And this all needs to be up and running when you want to assess compliance or conformity to a regulation. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that, Martin. I think this is one for you, Willie. Should we be starting with certification of ISO 42001, or should we start with another certification first?
Well, that really depends upon the requirement of the organization's customers. It really depends. You know, if a company is let's say a contact center and they are not certified to anything, the first question I would ask: are you already using and deploying AI systems, or is it more of importance that you're protecting the information under your jurisdiction? Most likely, that is the more important one, and that would mean 27001.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you are company is already certified to whatever management system standard, adding on an ISO 42001 certification is relatively speaking easy, because all of those management system standards are based upon what is called the high-level structure. And that means that fundamentally all the sections in the standard are very, very similar. Context of the organization, risk assessment, management commitment, management responsibility. It's always the same, but then obviously fine-tuned, for lack of a better word, for a specific scope.
Mm-hmm.
So if an organization is just doing AI development, then obviously I would suggest 42001 certification pretty much immediately. On the other hand, if the organization is more dealing right now with the question of, can I trust you with my data? Then I would suggest more 27001. But it doesn't really matter with what standard the organization starts, because later on, adding the other to the mix is, as I said, quite simple and easy.
Right. One last question. I think this one is for you, Willie, again. With the legislation and the certification coming in quite slowly and so on and so forth, so decisions are being made today at the conference that you're at and so on and so forth. But with AI moving so quickly, are things that are put in the certificates today, are they still going to be valid when they're actually ready for certification?
Yes. So
Good.
Fundamentally,
I thought your answer was just yes there.
Yeah, I always go for that short answer, yes, and then I talk for the next 20 hours or so.
I've noticed.
Yes, the certificate is valid, and there will be always changes. There will be changes in scope, there will be changes in whatever, but the management system fundamentally does not change that rapidly. The product, the AI system, may change very, very rapidly, but the management system, the structure, the governance system does not change that rapidly. But That said, yes, there will be changes to the standard coming whenever they will come. The industry has been through this revision of ISO management systems, as I alluded to. In the last 30 years, I'm pretty much sure I've been through 10 of those revisions from various standards. It's common practice. Things are changing, things are getting updated and modernized, and organizations then usually have a period of time to transition to the new version. So don't worry, don't hesitate. Just get it done, get certified as soon as possible, because sooner or later you will have to be, and it's much better to do it under less pressure, doing it voluntarily, than being told you shall be certified by the end of whatever, and then panic breaks out. It's much better to do it now under relaxed conditions.
Yeah, maybe one thing to add there. So when we talk about certifying something and validity also, it's when you have a product, for example, it's usually there's also an expiration attached to it. So if you look especially at cybersecurity, if you look at the EU Cybersecurity Act, so we're making a little bit the link between the AI Act and the Cybersecurity Act. What they have there is also a certain expiration, and you need to then go through reassessments as well, because the attack landscape is evolving over time. I remember in the past when we did the first evaluations on smart cards, for example, the authorities typically said on the question on how long is it valid, they said it's valid at the moment it's issued, and then we don't know. Yeah, so because there might be a new attack the next day that is breaking the system, so it's a bit tricky. So that's why usually for things which are changing, so either the solution is changing or the environment is changing, there are typically also regular reassessments needed to always see if it's still leveling to the state of the art or not, and if some modifications need to be done.
Okay, thanks for that, Martin. So I'm going to go on to some of the questions that we've had from people watching now from around the world. Just let me find it. Okay, so the first question, I think this is clear. I think that this might be one for Tomislav. It would obviously be highly regulated what technology or laptops, phones, etc. auditors are to use during auditing the cybersecurity of the system. So I think it's basically, are the people who are doing the checking, have they been checked? Is that what I understand
Yes.
by that question?
Yes,
Yeah, so
actually, I can take that because I've been in this kind of situations where I needed not to go through just a metal detector, but one of those body scanners, and no USB ports, and old-fashioned sheet of paper and pen.
Yeah.
So yes, it really depends upon the situation. When you go to an defense contractor, there will be different expectations for the auditors than going to I don't know, a contact center that is handling travel inquiries for a travel agency.
Right. Do you have
let
anything
me add
to add,
a little
Thomas?
bit. Yeah, so as Martin was mentioning, the regulation is basically the first step, and with the regulation we need standards, and with standards we also need sort of certification schemes, which are the framework and setting up the rules how you assess and audit certain system, which is then comparable to independently comparable to whoever does the assessment. And similar, we see that in cybersecurity certification schemes, there are certain requirements for the people who are doing the evaluation, for the auditors, for the desktopers, as well as for the equipment they are using. And we expect a similar thing happen also for the AI system, but it's still not there yet. The regulation will come first, and hopefully then the standards and the certification schemes will be developed with it as well.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Thomas. And we have another question, which is, I think this one might be for Willie. Is there not any IRCA approved ISO 42001 training as of yet?
Correct. As of yet, there are no IRCA approved 42001 training programs out there, which is not a surprise because, as I said earlier, the standard, the full version of the standard has not been published yet. It's only in FDIS, Final Draft International Standard. But I can tell you that we have already developed a training material based on the FDIS. And as soon as the final version of the standard is out, that training material will be reviewed, updated, and submitted for approval by applicable professional accreditation bodies, for example, IRCA. Yes.
Right.
So right now, no. Future, yes.
Okay. And I think there's one for you, Martin, which is quite nice, which means you all get one. How is SGS using these AI technologies in-house?
Yeah, so this is what I said at the beginning, where I said our team is looking on how we use technology and how we assess technology. So this would fall now in the first part. So SGS is a huge company, so obviously would be a surprise if there's no AI used. So we use AI in several areas to improve operations. So that's in our test labs. So we have hundreds of test labs for food, for consumer products, and so on. So there are multiple AI systems used in those labs. I cannot go too much in detail, obviously, because this is also internal information. But to give an example, if you have seed in a food lab, you analyze seed, you can obviously use computer vision to assess or count the seeds and also separate the seeds, which type of seed you are assessing, or for example, bacteria analysis, pesticide analysis, and things like that. That's on the testing side. For the general part, we also use testing in in the cybersecurity space. We use AI. This is also not a secret. I can say it. So there's from the authorities when you attack semiconductor chips, there is what I mentioned before, these attack groups that are aligning more or less what state of the art is. And one element there is also using deep learning to do attacks on semiconductor chips, and we also using that, for example, in the labs. But also when you look at audits, we are also looking there in improving how audits are done, or in particular when audits are completed and you review reports. We have hundreds of thousands of reports that need to be reviewed every year, and also there we are utilizing AI to speed obviously that up.
Right, that's great. Well, thank you very much. You'll be delighted to know that my closing section has been written by ChatGPT, so we'll just see how good AI is. Arnie famously said, "I'll be back," when refused entry to a police station in the first Terminator film.
I'll have to say that with my German accent. I'll be back.
Now I'm scared. He returned moments later and smashed his way in. I'm not sure when I'll be back, but I do know that for now, it's time to go. I want to thank Tomislav, Willie, and Martin for filling the gaps in my knowledge. I also want to thank you for watching, and I hope you leave enlightened somewhat on the subject of AI and cybersecurity. The third LinkedIn Live event is on Thursday, the 26th of October at 9 a.m. UK time, And you can find details of all the events for Cybersecurity Awareness Month at the address that I believe is going to appear on screen now. Maybe not. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. I'm Daniel Tatarski. See you soon and goodbye for now.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.